zenzoneofsociety.com. List of generations chart. Greatest generation is the GI generation from 1901 to 1924 and the silent generation from 1925 to 1945. They both experienced World War II in adulthood and childhood, civil rights movement, etc., etc. The baby boomers, the boom generation / hippie, from 1946 to 1964, space exploration, first modern counterculture. Generation X, in two categories. Baby Buster from 1965 to 1980, experienced Vietnam War and Cold War. MTV Generation / Boomerang Generation from 1975 to 1985, rise of mass media, end of the Cold War. Generation Y, Echo Boom Generation, also known as Generation McGuire, 1978 to 1990, rise of the information age, internet, war on terror, Iraq War, rising on gas and food prices. 21st century. Generation Z, new silent generation, 1995 to 2007, rise of information. Greatest generation. The greatest generation is a term for those Americans who fought in World War II, as well as those kept in the front home contact during it. Some of those who survived the war then went on to build and rebuild the United States industries in the years following the war. The silent generation was the generation born between the two world wars, who were too young to join the service when World War II started. Many had fathers who served in World War I. It was coined in the November 5th, 1951 cover story of Time to refer the generation within the United States coming of an age at the time. The article, which defined the generation at the time as born from 1923 to 1933, found its characteristics as grave and fatalistic. Conventional, processing confused morals, expecting disappointment, but dishearing faith. For women, desiring both career and family. To me, that's a hard but sad generation. Baby boomers. The baby boomers were the generation born just after World War II, a time that included a 14-year increase in birth rate worldwide. Following World War II, several English-speaking countries, the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, experienced an unusual spike in birth rates, a phenomenon commonly referred to as the baby boom. Baby boomers in their teen and college years were characteristically part of the 1960 counterculture, but later became more conservative, eventually gave birth to Generation X and Y. Most academic and demographic literature uses 1946 and 1964 as the cutoff years of the baby boom generation. The hippie subculture was originally a youth movement that began in the United States during the early 1960s and spread around the world. These people created their own communities, listened to psychedelic rock, embraced their sexual revolution, and used drugs such as cannabis and LSD to explore alternative states of consciousness. Sounds like a lot of fun to me, but they gave birth to Generation X and Y. Generation X. Generation X is the generation born between approximately 1964 to 1980. It connected to the pop culture of the 1980s and the 90s. They grew up, and the term has been used demography, the social science, and marketing through. It is most often used in popular culture. Other names used interchangeably with Generation X are the 13th generation and baby busters. Most of this generation are children of the baby boomers and the silent generation. Those born before 1973 spent most of their teen years in the 1980s. Baby busters is a term which used interchangeably with Generation X and the 13th century to describe those people born in between approximately 1965 and 1979. Others define it as the post-peak boomers. The long, steady decline of baby boomer birth rates starting at 1958 and ending in 1968. Awareness of this generation began in the early 1990s with culture touchstones like the Lollapalooza Festival and the grunge band Nirvana's song Smells Like Teen Spirit, and Time magazine's 1990 cover story titled 20-something. The MTV Generation is a term sometimes used to refer to people born from the mid-1970s to the mid-1980s. As a group, they constituted the youth culture of the turn of the millennium, ranging from age 15 to 25 in 2000. Culturally, the term MTV Generations has been widely used to define the generation of young adults in the Western world who are influenced by fashion, trends, music, and slang terms shown in music videos on the newly created cable channel MTV. MTV Generation has often been associated as the neologism for Generation X. The teens of the MTV generation who grew up in the 1990s have also been referred to as the Doom Generation, picked up from Greg Arkel's The Doom Generation 1995 due to the popularity of the 1993 computer game Doom. Boomerang Generation is one of the several terms applied to the current generation of young adults in the Western culture, born approximately between 1975 and 1986. They were also named for the frequency with which they choose to cohabitate with their parents after a brief period of living alone, thus boomerang back to their place of origin. This cohabitation can take many forms, ranging from situations that mirror the high dependency of pre-adulthood to high independency, separate household arrangements. The term can also be used as indicate only those members of this age set that actually do return home. Generation Y. Generation Y, sometimes referred to as the Millennials, Echo Boomers, or jokingly as Generation Y, refers to the cohort of individuals born roughly between 1982 and 1994. These are usually the children of the baby boomers, and people in the early Generation X and Generation Y grew up with many worldwide changing events, including the rise of mass communication and the internet. The Y generation is known as the culture war battleground, with growing disagreements between conservative and progressive perspectives. 1976 to 2001 is the wildest possible definition commonly cited, but generally speaking, this generation starts with the 1980s and ends in the middle of the 1990s. Generation Z. This is the generation of people living in the Western or First World cultures that follow Generation Y. Experts differ on when the earliest members of Generation Z were born, ranging from 1990 to 2001. Though a majority of opinion claims that 1996, several other names have been used to refer to this population group, including Generation V for virtual, Generation C for community or content, Generation Cox, the new silent generation, the Homeland Generation, or even the Google Generation. Generation Y. Generation Z. Visit www.zenzoneofsociety.com. Nothing but Zen.